Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Paplanus, and for my presentation, I will be detailing the S-Run-R reading strategy. S-Run-R is one of 3 reading strategies we discussed in class, and reading strategies were made to help students better actively engage with their reading and help increase their overall comprehension of the material. I personally liked S-Run-R the best of the 3 because I found it was the best for my engagement, my motivation, and my comprehension. I also liked that it was developed to meet the needs of the college students and it reflected our own specific time needs. S-Run-R is great for more difficult texts because of the intense amount of repetition, and it consists of 5 steps: surveying, reading, underlining, note-taking, and reviewing. To get a little more into detail about the 5 steps, the first thing you do is survey. This is a really quick overview of the chapter headings and the end of chapter summary. It should take no more than 5 minutes, and it's really just to give you a brief overview about what the article is about. You then move on to reading. You should break the paper down into chunked headed sections, and you should read one of these at a time. You then go ahead and underline or highlight all the important points you find in each individual headed section. You then take those highlights or underlined words and summarize them in your own words in your notes through note-taking. You will repeat the reading, underlining, and note-taking steps for each section of the paper until the entire article is complete. You then move on to the reviewing stage, which is when you add symbols to your notes, do the end of chapter questions, make up your own test questions. Basically, this is when you're testing your own comprehension and ensuring you understood what the article was actually about. As a whole, S-Run-R aims to improve your comprehension, your confidence, and your memory of the material. This is largely done through the intense amount of repetition. Sometimes, depending on how often you repeat the steps, you may review the same amount of material up to 9 times. So it is extremely repetitive. However, this repetition has great benefits. As Van Vlerkum has found, S-Run-R is beneficial in increasing comprehension. Van Vlerkum wrote, "You can't highlight effectively, take notes, write questions, and actively review the material without thinking about what the text material means." Essentially, Van Vlerkum is saying that with that intense amount of repetition and by engaging with the material in so many different ways, it's nearly impossible for you not to at least somewhat understand what is being talked about. It's also great for encoding because of the large amount of repetition. And it's great preparation for tests because you create your own notes that summarize all the important information. That way, when it's time to study for a test, you can reread your own notes rather than rereading the entire article. This saves you time in the long run, making S-Run-R more time effective. I personally use this strategy for the ED10 reflection journal, but I also used it in my sociology reading because I thought it was so helpful when I did it for ED10. I had a reading called Fundamental Causes of Health by Lincoln Phelan, and I felt like it was going to be extremely difficult, so I decided to use S-Run-R. I used those 5 steps we talked about earlier by skimming over the headings, reading my chunks of writing, highlighting all the important information in each section, summarizing those points in my own words in my Google Notes, and adding any additional annotations and creating possible test questions afterwards. And I was overall really happy with the results. At the end of the week, I got 100% on the quiz. And I think this was because I was able to better encode and comprehend the material because I was repeatedly exposed to it so many times and I engaged with it in so many different ways. I also long-term had higher levels of recall and comprehension. We built upon the information found in this article for weeks, and I was always able to recall exactly what we talked about initially. I also was able to make connections to my other readings throughout the rest of the quarter, showing that I did actually understand what was being taught in this article. I also just felt better about it. I felt like I was more engaged and I was more confident overall. And I think this was largely because I was exposed to it so many times and I engaged with it in so many different ways, like highlighting and taking notes and then asking myself questions at the end. In the future, I would definitely use this, especially for classes in which I struggle. Next quarter, I'm taking a Middle Eastern history class, and I know history is always really hard for me to get through the readings for. So I will apply S-Run-R to help increase my motivation and my comprehension of the material. And I highly recommend you do the same for any classes you may struggle with. However, I may say sometimes headed sections can be really large and can be multiple pages, and it can be really difficult for you to remember all of the important information throughout such a large chunk. So I may suggest in the future creating smaller chunked sections, perhaps by paragraph size rather than by direct headings. Here are my references, and thank you for a great quarter.